Hey, Zach here. Today I figured I'd mix it up a little bit and go somewhere where trains actually still run. Here we are in Point of Rocks, Maryland, and beside the historic station that you see behind me, there's a tunnel to check out, there's the C&O Canal Trail, and the Potomac River. Hopefully we'll see a couple of trains too. So come along with me, it should be a good one. On the western side of Maryland, along the Potomac River, lies Point of Rocks, an area steeped in natural as well as industrial history. Point of Rocks gets its name from a rock formation on the nearby Catoctin Mountain, which was formed over millions of years as the Potomac River cut a water gap through the ridge. In the late 1820s, this geological formation became a point of contention between the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, as both wanted to lay claim to the narrow strip of land between the river and the mountain for their growing transportation network. The companies battled in court for 6 years before ultimately deciding to share the right-of-way. The B&O eventually constructed a tunnel through the mountain to broaden their claim. Ultimately, over the ensuing decades, the railroad vanquished the canal in the transportation wars. And although there are remnants of the canal still in existence all along the Potomac, the railroad is still a prominent and active fixture in the area. We'll explore the railroad tunnel and the remnants of the canal a little later. For now, we're going to start our exploration a little southeast of Point of Rocks' namesake cliffs. Following the tracks in this direction, we soon come to one of the most distinctive railroad destinations in all of Maryland, the historic Point of Rocks Railroad Station, situated at the junction of the B&O Old Main Line and the Metropolitan Branch. From the neighboring parking lot, accessing the station requires just a short walk. On weekends, this parking lot is fairly empty, but on weekdays, it does fill up with people using the Maryland Area Regional Commuter or MARC trains. As we approach the tracks, we are reminded to look both ways, always a good practice when crossing an active rail line. Crossing this first set of tracks brings us to the edge of the middle station platform. This platform is still in use for MARC passengers disembarking at the end of their day of commuting. The platform on the other side of the tracks is where passengers board the trains in the morning to travel in toward Washington, D.C. During the rush hour periods, in the morning and afternoon, this station can see almost 24 MARC trains a day. The MARC trains don't run on weekends, so we won't be seeing any today. But before too long, we are treated to our first freight train of the day. Those auto-rack trains are commonplace through here. That one was empty, heading back to the Midwest car plants to be filled up again. Full auto-racks will come from the reverse direction, bringing their cars to the unloading facilities in the Baltimore and Columbia areas. Maybe it's time to explain exactly where each of these lines goes, and also expand on the railroad history of this place a bit. And to do that, I'll use this handy Maryland Department of Transportation map, which conveniently shows all of the active rail lines in the state. The B&O Main Line is one of the oldest rail lines in America. It was completed around 1830 and ran west out of Baltimore to Point of Rocks, where it met up with the Potomac and the C&O Canal. For a time, Point of Rocks was the western terminus of the line, until the aforementioned court clashes with the C&O Canal ended. After that, the line was extended west to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. In 1835, the B&O completed the Washington branch, which split off of the main line in Relay, Maryland, 7 miles south of Baltimore, and extended southwest to Washington, D.C. This line is notable for containing the Thomas Viaduct, the first multi-span masonry railroad bridge in the United States, and the largest bridge in the country when it was first constructed. I'll definitely be exploring this bridge in a future video. Moving along, the B&O completed the Metropolitan branch in 1873, which finally gave the company another westward route, running northwest out of Washington, D.C. to connect with the main line at Point of Rocks. The Metropolitan branch became the primary route for passenger trains heading west, with the B&O preferring the significantly straighter new line to the longer and curvier old route. Consequently, the old main line got relegated to secondary status, catering primarily to local passenger trains and slower-moving loaded freights. Since 1987, when the B&O merged with the chassis system to form CSX, the names of the lines have changed slightly. The original route is still the old main line, but the Washington branch is now called the Capital Subdivision, and the line is shared between CSX and MARC trains. The Metropolitan branch became the Metropolitan Subdivision and is shared by CSX, MARC, and Amtrak. So the Autorac train that just passed was coming up the Metropolitan Subdivision from DC, but it almost certainly originated near Baltimore on the Capital Subdivision. And the tracks on the left here go onto the old main line. Finally, the tracks going away from the Y branch, opposite the station, are going on to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and other points west. Now that we know all about the trackage here, let's take a closer look at the station itself. The Point of Rocks station was built in 1873, along with the rest of the Metropolitan branch. It was designed by E. Francis Baldwin, the head architect for the B&O at the time, who also designed a number of other station buildings for the railroad, many of which survive to the present. The Point of Rocks station is in the National Register of Historic Places and exists largely in its original state, although it has seen better days and could use some window replacement and other rehabilitation. You'll notice the station is fairly symmetric between the branching tracks, as it had to accommodate passengers accessing both railroad lines. The station is notable for its tower, featuring a pyramidal roof with a window on each side, topped by a square cupola, which is capped by a pyramidal peaked roof. Now you may wonder, as I did, whether this tower ever housed a clock, but in all of the old pictures that I've sifted through, it only ever contained the design it has now. While the station still exists, there are other structures that no longer survive, including this signal tower that used to sit right across the tracks. Its use was discontinued in the 1950s, and it was removed sometime later, although I couldn't find out exactly when. This photo likely dates back to the 1940s or 1950s. Going back even further, to 1911, we can see there used to be even more structures in the station area, including a water tower and what looks like a small freight station over by the old main line trackage. Here is a photo taken at the same time from the other direction, and we can see there was a small building next to the tower. It's also interesting to note all the old telegraph lines along the tracks, which are long gone. You might notice that the name on the side of the station isn't Point of Rocks here. That's because from the late 1800s to about 1923, it was called Washington Junction. In subsequent years, it reverted back to its Point of Rocks designation, though. Finally, here is a view of the village north of the station, also taken in 1911. You'll notice that both the canal and the railroad prominently traversed the area at this time, and buildings lined both sides of the railroad and canal. Most of these buildings no longer survive, although some do. This church, and the building across Clay Street from it, still exist. While this area is an active MARC station, the building itself is not open to the public. It would be nice if they did remodel the structure and reopen it to passenger use, or perhaps turn it into a little museum focusing on the history of the area. As I was waiting for the next train, I noticed these hawks or perhaps eagles circling overhead. Now, I'm not a birder, so maybe a viewer can identify these. Enough bird watching, I guess. I almost missed the next train. This one coming in from the west. It looks to be a loaded coal train coming out of West Virginia and heading down the old main line for Baltimore. We can see that there's another train waiting on the Metropolitan line that I hadn't even noticed before. I actually saw a second loaded coal train following the same path later, but for variety's sake, I won't include it in this video. Once those two coal trains passed, the train that was sitting on the Metropolitan line was finally free to go. This was a short ash train from the Montgomery County incinerator. Later, we got the most interesting freight train, this time a manifest, also coming from the west, but this time heading down the Metropolitan tracks toward Washington, D.C. As I was focusing on the freight train, I almost missed this work train coming right up alongside. I'm pushing the drone to the extent of its range here, but it pays off as we can see the work train disappearing into the tunnel. Let's put my drone flying skills to the test as we descend to the tunnel. We can see just how close the Route 15 bridge is to the portal here. I'll try to thread the needle here to get a better view. We can see the date on the top says 1902. While the tunnel here was originally dug in the late 1860s, it was expanded in 1902 to accommodate larger trains. Originally, both tracks went through the tunnel, but in the 1960s, the eastbound track was moved outside of the tunnel. This was accomplished by blasting the cliffside and dumping the excavated rocks into the canal bed, allowing room for the external track. Let's get a closer look at the tunnel. We just have to head west out of the marked parking lot, cross the tracks and the old canal trail, to gain access to this visitor parking lot. From this parking lot, there is easy access to the C&O Canal towpath trail. To the right, the trail goes all the way to Washington, D.C. And in this direction, it goes all the way to Cumberland in western Maryland. At over 184 miles long, all the history along this trail would be worth a whole series of videos. And I do plan to visit a number of other places along this trail in the future. We can see the dried up canal bed next to the trail here. I particularly like this image where we can see the canal bed, the railroad tunnel, and the highway bridge. 3 successive modes of transportation at the same spot. Under the highway bridge, there is a point where we can access the eastern portal of the tunnel. This is obviously a popular location for graffiti artists. Looking this way, we can almost see back to the station. Before long, I heard a train approaching. Unfortunately, it was coming from the west, and therefore not coming through the tunnel. This time, it is a loaded auto rack heading toward Baltimore. I don't know whether this one continued down the Metropolitan or used the old main line to get there. I continued hiking up the old canal towpath to see if I could get any good views of the western portal of the tunnel. Unfortunately, unlike the eastern portal, there was no access path, and the canal bed was too steep to traverse at this point. This was the best viewpoint I could get through the trees. I was afforded some serene views of the Potomac River, though. This is one of my favorite rivers, mostly because of the rocky formations prevalent along it. Here you can see the rocky bottom of the river as it calmly flows between the mainland and Patton Island. This guy has the right idea on this beautiful day. But every so often the calm is broken by a low-flying helicopter. Back at the highway bridge, I decided to see what views I could get of the river here. In the process, we catch sight of some other boaters out on the water. Here's a nice view of the full bridge from the shore. And just below, in the water, I found what I thought were thousands of tadpoles. But after closer inspection, I don't know what they are. Maybe a knowledgeable viewer can let me know. While here, I did see another boater paddling up the rocky river. It looks fun, but I'm not the strongest swimmer, so I'll just have to live vicariously. As we close our journey through Point of Rocks, we rise above it all, capturing a bird's-eye view of the river that has quietly witnessed over 2 centuries of transformation. From the age of canals to the thunder of the railroads, and now the hum of the modern highway, this landscape holds the memory of each passing era. A place where nature and industry have long shared the stage. And as the river keeps flowing, so too does the story. Well, I hope you liked this little visit to Point of Rocks, Maryland. It's one of my favorite places to go. It's got the tunnel, the river, the C&O Canal path, and of course the railroad. And we did get lucky and see a couple of trains today. If you did like this video, let me know in the comments what was your favorite part. And please consider subscribing so that you don't miss any of my future adventures. You never know where I'll be, but you always know that it's going to be somewhere interesting and with a little bit of history to it. Until next time, see you later.